You know, every single time you post something, click a link, or even just walk down the street with your phone in your pocket, you're leaving behind this invisible trail of data. We usually think of it as, just personal stuff, maybe not a big deal. But what happens when someone starts piecing that trail together? Today, we're going to dive into how law enforcement is using that massive ocean of digital information we all create, what we call big data, to investigate, predict, and even prevent crime.
All right, so here's the game plan. We'll kick things off with the big data revolution itself. Then we'll get into the new power imbalances this whole thing creates, the pretty surprising partnerships between governments and tech giants, and some of the futuristic tools being used for crime prediction. And to wrap it all up, we'll look at the global fight to protect our digital rights.
Okay, first things first, we need to set the stage. The internet has gone through this radical change. We're not just sitting back and consuming information anymore. We are the authors. We're constantly creating the digital world all around us.
And this scale here, it's just mind-boggling. The biggest social media platforms have a combined user base of around 2 billion people. That's billions of us, creating, sharing, and reshaping content every single day. We're generating an amount of information that's just unprecedented.
So you hear this term big data thrown around all the time, right? But it's really important to get that it's not just a buzzword for a lot of data. It's about how all these powerful technologies, things like massive cloud computing centers, super high-speed networks, and powerful analytics, all come together. This combination is what allows for the near real-time analysis of these huge data sets, all to find patterns and predict what might happen next.
So when you have this giant ocean of data, it naturally leads to a huge fundamental shift in power. And suddenly, the question of who actually controls all this information becomes one of the most important questions out there.
And what you get is this, well, it's a massive imbalance, an asymmetry of information. Billions of us are out there producing all this data, but there's only a tiny handful of massive tech companies and government agencies that have the resources to actually collect it, store it, and analyze it on a huge scale.
And get this power struggle isn't just about money or companies. It's actually geopolitical. I mean, think about it. Most of the major social media platforms are based in the United States. That gives the US a huge strategic advantage in monitoring what's happening around the world. And, of course, that creates a real challenge for places like the European Union, which ends up relying on foreign companies to handle its own citizens' data.
Okay, so this is where it gets really interesting. This is the core of it. How exactly do governments and their police forces get their hands on this huge treasure trove of data that's held by private companies? How do they use it for social surveillance?
Yeah, so forget the old image of spies in trench coats. Modern surveillance is all about this partnership between the public and private sectors. Tech companies collect our data, we agree to their terms of service, and then governments find ways to access it, either with a mandatory court order or through more, let's say, voluntary and often very secretive collaborations.
And this table, wow, it really lays out just how structured this collaboration can be. You have programs like PRISM, which reportedly gave the NSA direct access right into the servers of major tech companies. Then you have others, like Bull Run, that were designed specifically to break or bypass encryption, basically giving authorities a backdoor into communications we all thought were secure.
And you gotta remember, this isn't just a US thing, not by a long shot. While the American programs are probably the most famous, or infamous, very similar large-scale surveillance systems have been reported all across Europe, from the UK's Tempora to programs in Sweden, France, and Germany. It's a global phenomenon.
All right, so let's move from the theory to the real world. How is all this data actually being used by police on the streets? How is big data analytics being used not just to solve crimes that have already happened, but to try and predict them?
First up, we have something straight out of science fiction, predictive policing. There's this software called Predpol, and what it does is it crunches data on the places, the times, and the types of recent crimes to predict where future crimes are most likely to happen. And this, of course, raises this fascinating legal question. Can a prediction from an algorithm ever be the basis for reasonable suspicion or probable cause?
And check this out. There's another tool called X1 Discovery. It can take a specific location, say the city block where a crime happened, and then it can go back in time and search through all the public geotagged tweets from that area. It basically lets investigators cast this huge digital dragnet to see who was in a specific place at a specific time.
So this all leads to the million-dollar question, right? The data's public, you posted it for everyone to see, so is it fair game for law enforcement to just scoop it all up and analyze it? Well, as it turns out, the answer completely depends on which side of the Atlantic you're on. And right here, you see this huge clash in legal philosophy. In the US, there's something called the third-party doctrine. Generally, it means that once you voluntarily hand your data over to a company, like your internet provider or a social media site, you pretty much lose your right to privacy over it. The European Union, though, sees things very differently. European courts have basically said that even public information can become private when it's systematically collected and stored by the government, because the sheer scale of it can reveal incredibly private things about you.
So, with these two completely different ways of looking at things, you can bet there's a huge fight going on. It's a major regulatory battle. So how are governments, especially in Europe, trying to build a wall around their citizens' data?
The EU's big weapon in this fight is the GDPR. You've probably heard of it. It was designed to be a protective barrier for its citizens' data, and its most powerful feature is its global reach. The rules apply to any company, anywhere in the world, that offers services to people in the EU. It doesn't matter if you're in Brussels or Silicon Valley.
And the EU didn't stop there. They've also laid down some really specific rules for how law enforcement can use data. And these principles demand precision. Data collection has to be for a specific, legitimate purpose. It can't just be a giant fishing expedition. And it forces authorities to make really clear distinctions between the data they have on suspects, victims, or just witnesses, and to apply different levels of protection for each.
You know, this quote right here from the European Court of Human Rights, it perfectly sums up the entire European way of thinking about this. The point isn't whether one single piece of data is public or private. It's all about the context. The argument is that the act of mass, systematic collection by the government fundamentally changes the nature of that data.
So, at the end of the day, it all boils down to this massive, fundamental question for our generation. As our lives become more and more digital, and our data just flows across borders to be collected by who knows how many companies and governments, who should have the final say over our digital selves? Should it be you, the individual, the corporation, or the state? That right there is the debate that's going to define privacy for the 21st century.